Many years ago, I went through a divorce. And as you can imagine, this was a very difficult time in my life. And for years afterwards, I didn't want to have anything to do with men. Now, I was not unhappy during this time. I was working on my career, on storytelling, developing new friendships. Really, it was a very rich and meaningful time in my life. And during this time, I had a signature story I would tell, an old classic Japanese folktale called The Crane Wife. In it, a young man rescues a crane from a trap. Later on, a lovely young woman comes to his door and he marries her. She weaves beautiful cloth for him, but makes him promise he will not look at her while she is weaving. But he breaks his promise, and when he looks, he sees not his wife sitting at the loom. It is the crane pulling feathers from its own body and placing them in the loom. And she leaves him because he has discovered her true nature, and this is not allowed. And it was so satisfying to tell that story because she leaves him. Well, I was going along like that for several years, telling that story and others. And then one day I discovered a new story and I really liked it. I really liked it. I felt drawn to it. So that is the story I'll tell you now. It goes like this. Once in India, a long time ago, there lived a Raja. He had one child, a young woman, all grown up. The princess was beautiful, charming, and very independent. She loved to hunt more than anything else in the world. And one day she was hunting with her companions and she became separated from them. So she thought she would climb a tree. Perhaps she could catch sight of them in the distance. But when she got up into the tree, she saw a forest fire in the distance. It was a horrible sight. The flames were leaping up. The animals were running this way and that in a frenzy of fear. And then she saw a family of geese. The father and the mother were trying to save their babies who were too young to fly. Finally, the male flew off, saving himself, leaving his mate. She threw herself over the babies and they perished in the flames. This scene was so horrific, the princess could not get it out of her mind. Even days later, back at the palace, she couldn't stop thinking about it. That selfish male, she thought. I'm sure all males are like that, man or beast. I shall have nothing more to do with them. And she went to her parents and told them she had decided she would never marry. Her parents were concerned, of course, but the princess would not tell them the reason for her decision. She refused to see the many suitors who called upon her at the palace, and gradually word spread throughout the kingdom, and she became known as the princess who will not marry. After some time, a traveling artist came to the palace to paint. He caught sight of the princess in a hallway and was so struck by her beauty, he asked permission to paint her. She agreed reluctantly, and he painted a portrait of her that captured her very essence. When he was finished, he packed up his paints and his brushes, took the portrait, and he left. He traveled for several months and came to a distant kingdom and showed his work to the Raja there, who was so taken with the portrait of the princess that he purchased it and put it up in his great hall. Several days later, his son, the prince, came home from a hunting trip, walked into the hall, saw the portrait, and could not take his eyes from this beautiful woman. He would do nothing but sit in front of the portrait all day long, staring at it. Well, the Raja tried to find the artist to discover the identity of the woman, but the artist was long since gone. The prince sat in front of the portrait day after day, growing sadder and sadder, and I'm sorry to say, more and more bad-tempered. One day, the prime minister, a loyal and trusted family friend, accidentally disturbed the prince in his meditations before the portrait. The prince flew into a rage and condemned the prime minister to death. Well, Nothing could be done. The prince's word was law. The prime minister went home to settle his affairs, and he told this whole story to his own daughter, a resourceful young woman. She vowed that she would save her father. She went to the prince and offered to go on a journey to discover the identity of the mysterious woman. By now, the prince was beginning to regret his hasty action, and he readily agreed. Now, the prime minister's daughter was a very fine artist herself, and so first she made a small copy of the portrait that looked exactly like it. She disguised herself as a man for easier traveling and began her journey. Everywhere she went, she showed people the copy of the portrait, but no one knew who it was. Finally, after several months, she came to a distant kingdom. And to her great delight, everyone knew who it was. Why, that is our princess, they all said. The princess who will not marry. The princess who will not marry, but why? Is something wrong with her? No one knew the reason. It was said even her own parents did not know. Well, the prime minister's daughter was not about to give up. She rented a space very close to the palace, right at street level. She set up an art studio. She would sit in front of the large windows, painting pictures of such brilliant colors, people on the street began to notice. Courtiers from the palace began to watch her. Even the Raja heard of her talent and invited her to show her work to him. When she did, he was so pleased, he asked her to paint the walls of the palace he was building for his daughter, the princess who will not marry. So the prime minister's daughter began to paint the walls and the arches of the palace. Courtiers would come and watch her. She became quite friendly with some of them, including the princess's own handmaiden. And from her, she discovered the secret to why the princess would not marry. With this knowledge, the artist started to paint a new painting on a wall, the scene in the forest fire. But in her painting, she painted a family of antelopes, and it was the female who left the family. It was the male who stayed and perished with the young. And then off to the side, she painted a portrait of the prince up in a tree, so young and handsome, he would win the heart of any maiden. When she was finished, she invited the princess to come and see. They walked through the hallways together, the princess exclaiming over the beautiful colors, the fine compositions. And then they came to the scene of the forest fire. The princess stared at it for a long time. She said, "What is this?" "Oh, princess, this is something that happened to the prince in my country. Ever since he saw this, he has declared the total selfishness of females. He says he shall never marry." "Really?" said the princess. "Perhaps I have been wrong. I will have to think about this." And as time passed, word began to spread that the princess was not quite so opposed to marriage as she had been. Suitors began to come to the palace again, but the princess refused to see them. This time, she wanted to spend all her time sitting in front of the portrait of the prince, listening to the prime minister's daughter tell her stories of the prince's handsomeness and manliness and wonderfulness, until finally she decided she really must meet him. The prime minister's daughter promised to go home and try to persuade the prince to come and meet her. When she arrived at home and told her story, everyone rejoiced. Her father declared she had saved his life. The prince showered her with gifts and made ready for his journey. He traveled with such a magnificent caravan, he was declared a most worthy suitor. The prince and the princess met and fell immediately in love. They were married, and the wedding was so magnificent, they still tell the story today. So that was the story I was so drawn to, and not just this story, but 2 or 3 others that all ended with a man and a woman coming together at the end. I thought, What is going on? Well, you can probably guess. Very shortly after this, I met a man. We have been together now for 24 years, and 6 years ago, we got married because you don't want to rush into anything. But I tell this story to say, we should pay attention to the stories that call to us. They have much to teach us if we just know how to listen.